Well, welcome once again to another edition of Pray on This. I'm your host, John Pray. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications because with C11 coming, we know that a conservative voice like mine will be deemed not Canadian content, even though that it's done by a Canadian, it's on Canadian politics, written, filmed, directed, and produced by a Canadian. But there's no way Justin Trudeau will want a conservative voice like mine out there for all to see. Speaking of what I'm going to talk about before we head into this Easter long weekend, the Liberals think they have a winner. Now, when you do what I do for a living, you have to stay informed by all forms of media. That's print. Yes, for you young people, newspapers and magazines still exist. Television. Yes, I am forced to watch the CBC, CTV, and Global. Independent media. Now I try to stick to True North and a few trusted podcasts and avoid Rebel News. They do have some nuggets, but a lot of it's hype. And of course, the social media of Facebook, Instagram, and of course our favorite, Twitter. Since last Tuesday's budget, the Liberals have been selling it hard. And the theme that it is, we're making your life more affordable with dental care, rent subsidies, and grocery rebates that benefit 11 million low-income Canadians and seniors. It sounds wonderful. What a rich and prosperous nation that we are, that we can take care of all of our poor. However, a day or two after the Liberal Party cult members who blindly follow Justin Trudeau and his disciples stopped shouting down anyone who would question the divine wisdom of Justin Trudeau. Well, the new theme, it just didn't take hold. The narrative they're trying to spin in their favor has become as popular as swinging a dead cat that has sat in the summer sun for a few days in a room full of people. To say the real questions are now coming out, and I know, Twitter is not real life. But when it goes from those platforms and starts making it into the traditional mainstream media, including two major Canadian broadsheets, and the even ultra-liberal Toronto Sun starts to point out the problems with the budget, it's not good. On rent relief, it's been widely reported that a $500 one-time payment may help the average Canadian with rent, but when rent in Canada is $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year, giving people what amounts to a week of rent is nice. But what about the other 51 weeks? The dental care is so targeted that in a country with, according to Stats Canada, 2 million children under the age of 12, a program that cost $5 billion last year helped 250,000 children. Now, I know this year it extends out to children 18 years of age and under and seniors over 65. But again, if it's that targeted, what is $13 billion going to do? How many people are going to get helped? Can you say less than 1 million? And that grocery store rebate. Well, $465 for a family of four and much less for an individual might pay for 2 or 3 weeks of groceries. Again, what about the other 49 to 50 weeks? Are you just on your own? But that is the, hey, we're making your life more affordable side of the budget. The other horrors of the budget are now sinking in as well. Even those who first felt good about their cult-like support of Justin are starting to look and become alarmed. There's no reserve fund in this budget. The almost $30 billion that Krista Freeland had built into the previous budgets was used for new spending. That deficit this year is at $40.5 billion. It would have been over 70 if she hadn't used the reserve fund. And this is coming just 5 months after she predicted that this year's budget would only be $30 billion flat. It's also becoming a huge waving red flag that the interest to service our ever-growing huge national debt is now the third largest item line in the budget. We pay more to service our debt for all other things except healthcare and pensions. And in a few years, if this path is not altered, it will even surpass healthcare spending, and the government will spend more money to service the debt than everything but pensions. And what I said there was key. We're talking about servicing the debt. That's paying the interest, not one red cent of principal. It was never missed by economists, but now a lot of Canadians have noticed two other things about this budget. The first is the anchors that the Liberals have always used to justify their spending spree over the last 8 years. Low interest rates are gone, they're a thing of the past. The bonds the government will have to issue this year to cover their borrowing must be paid back at 5%, not 0.5%. And the debt to GDP ratio is shrinking. If you don't know what that means, it's really simple. Canada has always kept the debt, the amount of money we owe, at 50% or below the annual gross domestic product of the country. If you stay below it, the better your balance sheet, the less risk you are in the bond market, and the easier it is for you to borrow money. While Canada's debt will be at a minimum of $1.2 trillion at the end of this year's budget, our GDP will only be $1.98 trillion. Last year, our debt was slightly under $1 trillion and our GDP was $1.96 trillion. The debt is growing faster than gross domestic product. That's bad. However, what's far, far worse is the words balanced budget have been removed from the vocabulary of the Liberal Party of Canada. Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland have no intentions of ever balancing this budget. I think they believe they can just keep borrowing more and more and more. I believe they're trying to take a page out of the United States, but the US can do what they do because they're the world's reserve currency. We are not. Canadians are asking 3 questions. Hey, Justin, what's the end game? Because we can't keep borrowing money like this. Much sooner than later, Moody's or Standard & Poor will come knocking on the door of the Finance Ministry and tell us that our AAA plus credit rating is going to be downgraded. Second, why, when the economy is bad and about to get worse, cost of living out of control, did you raise the payroll taxes? You may call them investments, but the simple fact is that EI and CPP tax both employee and employer. Both sides pay more money when they go up, which means paychecks get smaller. You also just increased the carbon tax 30%. That further raises the cost on everything. You didn't do anything to make life affordable. As a matter of fact, you poured gasoline and diesel fuel on an already raging inflationary fire. Third, in a country of 40 million people, because that's what our population is now, why are 25% so poor that our government has to give them money to pay for their rent and food? What the hell happened to our country and our economy that 1/4 of our population, most of whom have jobs, are gainfully employed, that they can't afford to live in our country? What did you do to our country, Justin? The excuses you use, the Ukraine, COVID-19, global supply chains, are all wearing extremely thin. Most pandemic problems have been over for a year. The same with the supply chains. Now, considering that Trudeau and his minions still regularly blame Stephen Harper for economic problems, even though Justin's been our prime minister for 8 years, I'm sure they think they can keep whipping those dead horses for at least another 2 years. As for the war in the Ukraine, yes, it still rages. But it's become very clear that we do not import very many things from either of those countries. So that too is a dead horse. And for all those who like to say, oh, inflation is a world problem, it's a world problem because all major nations went deeply into debt to pay for COVID. But that doesn't mean that just because our inflation is slightly lower than the US or Great Britain, we're doing a great thing. And you don't bring out $70 billion in new spending. That just pours gasoline on the fire. To say the excuses are getting very thin, well, I've seen a lot of comments on social media and in letters to the editor. One that struck me was this. It was a comment directed at the Prime Minister on Twitter. Hey, Justin, you can blame Harper all you want, but when he was in power, I always had money at the end of the week when I was done paying my bills, and today I'm always short money paying the bills and my wallet's always empty. Also on Twitter, Liberal MPs, their ministers, and the Prime Minister are constantly getting ratioed with negative comments, and Justin can't even rely on the CBC to be his ministry of propaganda for him anymore, as they have been exposed to be nothing but that, pure propaganda, as they were so light with such softball questions and not at times even covering the Chinese election interference scandal. It's becoming clear that Canada's economic issues are a made-in-Canada problem. And it's also become very clear who's made those problems. It is the Liberal Government of Canada and our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Even the staged visits to the grocery store to get thanked by grateful Canadians that Trudeau and Freeland staged last week have flopped. No, it's not their videos that they have shown. They're high quality. Show grateful Canadians thanking their Liberal overlords for the extra money for bread. However, other Canadians recorded the setups for these, showing that anybody who dissented with Trudeau or Freeland were asked to leave, that only real supporters of the Liberal government were allowed to be the shoppers. So they've been exposed as being fake and staged and directed. It's not really helpful. I've always followed two doctrines in life. Always know your history and study the tactics of your adversaries. I am reminded of reading about the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, how one day at a Communist Party meeting in front of hundreds of delegates and party members, while others spoke, Stalin sat plucking the feathers out of a live chicken. When he was done, he called attention to himself and let the bird go. The bleeding, suffering bird walked around the hall. After a few minutes, he got up, grabbed a loaf of bread, and started ripping small pieces of bread off and dropping them on the floor in front of the chicken. The chicken came quickly and gobbled up the bread, even though it was still suffering and bleeding. Even after Stalin stopped feeding that poor bird, it still followed him around. To which Stalin said, I want to draw your attention to this. You see, it doesn't matter how much I make this creature or the people suffer. As long as I show them a little bit of kindness, they'll follow me. I know Justin Trudeau wishes he had the power that Stalin had, and believe me, he's tried to gain it. Thank God he hasn't. But that doesn't mean that he won't try the same tactics. In Canada, just so you are clear, Justin believes you are the chicken, and his small handouts are the kindness. Now, thank God for Canada that our people are not as dumb as that chicken, and that one day soon, according to the polls, we're going to put Justin Trudeau and his brand of the Liberal Party of Canada where it belongs, on the ash heap of history, and then we can start the very long road of recovery. Speaking of history, when I look at our economy, the budget, and the times that we live in, I cannot help but be reminded of our recent past. Well, our neighbor's recent past. 43 to 44 years ago, the lead up to the United States election in 1980, a man whom he too thought he knew what was best, but was completely out of his depth when it came to administration and governing of a major world economy named Jimmy Carter, stumbled and bumbled to the 1980 election. just like we're seeing our Prime Minister do right now. Now, President Carter is a far better man and a far better human being than Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has ever been, is now, or ever will be. But what is similar is the US was heading into a major recession that the president and his administration's policies had caused. Just as in Canada today, we are headed into a major recession, which a lot of our prime minister and his minister's policies is causing. On the election trail of that election, the turning point came when challenger Ronald Reagan said this: "A recession is when your neighbor loses his job. A depression is when you lose yours, and recovery will come when Jimmy Carter loses his." In the very near future, I can see Pierre Poilievre using very similar tactics on our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. He's already started. He's not even waiting for the next election trail. Justin Trudeau's incompetence has been fully exposed. His ignorance when it comes to governance and how to run an economy is on full display. It will not be long until the NDP can no longer support this man, because we all know the longer Jagmeet supports him, Justin Trudeau's problems become Jagmeet's problems. So when we finally, and hopefully soon, get to the election trail, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives will finally send Justin and his brand of liberal politics to the past, where it absolutely belongs. That, as always, is Pray on This. I'd like to wish you all a very happy Easter. May you spend it with family and friends. May you enjoy yourselves, and may you take a well-deserved break. I, too, will be doing so, and after church on Sunday, having a lovely brunch with my family. On Saturday, I'll be celebrating my wife's 44th birthday, and be doing so with her family. We will also be celebrating Easter at the same time. I hope that you all have as joyous a holiday as I intend to have, and I will see you all back here on Monday. God bless you all.